Hello everybody, Mannix here. This is going to be a video of me explaining the frame lock. How this locking mechanism works. This is going to be a series I'm going to do. I'll try to keep them as brief and as to the point as possible, but they're just going to be videos of me explaining locking mechanisms, how they work, how they function. This happens to be a Kershaw shield, and it has a frame lock. Now a frame lock is very similar to a liner lock, which you'll see more of the time compared to the frame lock, but essentially it works exactly the same, only the frame lock is the frame itself being the locking mechanism, not the liner being the locking mechanism. It functions exactly the same as a liner lock, though. A lot of people claim that the frame lock is one of the strongest locking mechanisms ever. They claim that it's superior to the liner lock. I'll get into that in the video. It's somewhat true, somewhat not true compared to the liner lock. It's not one of the strongest locking mechanisms, not by a long shot, but it's a strong one for one particular reason. But anyway, let's just start with the basics of it. So basically, it's just a cutout of the frame, and it's constantly wanting to bend this way. It's constantly trying to go over here. They bend it like that. If you were to take the knife apart, this would be very, very bent out. The reason it's not all the way over there is because the tang of the blade is stopping it just in time. So if you look very closely, I have it disengaged right now. Hopefully you can see that. The tang of the blade is on a slight angle. You can see it starts up there and it goes down just a little bit. That is so it naturally fits the lock into place. As you open the knife over and over and over again, it basically, you're putting wear on it. It's not even dust, it's basically nothing, but over time, according to physics, over time it will wear at some point, and as it wears, it allows it to sink deeper and deeper and deeper into the knife's tang, into the blade's tang, rather. So it's kind of like a self-adjusting locking mechanism, that's why it's on an angle. This is considered to be the lock bar's life bar. So this I would say, is about at like 70%. Or something. If it were out to here, like it's not really deep into the tang at all, that's considered a lower percent. The closer it is, the deeper it is into the tang, it has a higher percentage of its life bar left anyway. So that means if you were to keep opening this and opening this and opening this and opening this for years and years, and then eventually it finally made it all the way to the end of the handle, at some point, the more it grinds away at the steel, at a certain point you would start getting blade play, because there's now room in there for it to wiggle because it's been grinded away after so long, and there's nowhere else for it to go. So it's not to say it's a bad locking mechanism. I'm just trying to make the point that no locking mechanism really will last forever, but that being said, practically speaking, virtually speaking, it will last forever. You're not, unless you had it for like decades, you just keep using it over and over and always opening and closing it, eventually, yeah, it's going to fail on you, but that's not for a really long time. It's just a cutout of the frame. It's constantly trying to bend this way, and the blade is in the way of it, and then when you open it, just in time when there's space for it to clear, the locking mechanism just naturally bends into place. That's the frame lock. Oftentimes on frame locks and liner locks, they'll have a little ball bearing detent right there, as you can see, is the little circle right there in the lock bar. That just, it glides against the blade and it keeps it into place. That's essentially what is clicking it shut, is that detent right there. Now, the biggest reason the frame lock is considered stronger than the liner lock, the real reason I believe anyway, is simply just because your grip itself, your hand itself, is what's helping keeping it shut. Because as I'm gripping the knife, as you can see, my fingers are pushing down on this, they're pushing even further down on it. So your hand itself acts as extra enforcement to the locking mechanism. That's why it's considered a really, really strong locking mechanism. There are many stronger locking mechanisms out there, but that's essentially the reason why it's considered stronger than the liner lock. That being said, it's also thicker, but just because it's thicker doesn't necessarily mean it's that much stronger. There's more surface area there, which is good, but at the end of the day, all of the pressure gets built up right here, where it's very thin, where that's about as thin as a liner lock right there anyway. So if you really bang the crap out of this, I mean, if you really, you'd have to abuse the knife to actually break it. I mean, it's so rare it's going to happen. When people get into strength of locking mechanisms, oh, you can't use that knife for that, can't use that knife for that, you got to get a stronger locking mechanism. If you're using a folding knife and your locking mechanism's not strong for whatever task you're doing, you're probably abusing your folding knife. That's just me. Some people may argue that, but regardless, if you were to do something that would abuse this, that's what would have to snap right there, and that's probably what will snap right there. So even though it is a thicker bar, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be all that much stronger, because again, you still have a thin amount of steel right there. And one thing about the liner lock is that a lot of people don't seem to consider this, but even this thin part, like where it bends, because it's attached to the scale, I believe it kind of acts almost like a shock absorber, almost like a stabilizer a little bit. But either way, Now, speaking of stabilizer, the last thing I can show you about this frame lock right here, not all frame locks do this, but you can see, if you look very, very closely once again, you can see right where the pocket clip is resting on, there's a little black circular disc. And that disc gets in the way of the frame lock, so it prevents it from over-traveling. You can hear it clicking there. I'm trying to push it out of the handle, I'm trying to bend it out that way, but that stabilizer acts as a wall for that, so you cannot kick it out of there, which is good. Some frame locks don't have that simple little piece there, and it allows you to actually bend the frame lock, the lock bar itself, all the way out, and you pretty much ruin it. You'd have to take the knife apart if you actually did that, and then take the scale and then just bend it back into place and close it up. That would be an easy fix, but if you kept doing that over and over, you'd be putting so much wear on this, eventually it would just fail on you, I would think. But that lock bar stabilizer right there prevents that from ever happening. Now, some people think they're unnecessary. Yeah, it's true, because if you use common sense, you're not going to bend the frame all the way out like that. But that being said, it is nice knowing that you can't ruin your knife with your bare hands, if that makes any sense. You know, that's what I do like having the stabilizer on there. I mean, if you can ruin a knife with tools and screwdrivers and stuff, yeah, that's one thing. But if you can just literally do something with your hands to the knife and ruin it right then and there, yeah, I think that's kind of a cheapness to me. So I'm glad, I like it when they put the lock bar stabilizer on there. So anyway, that's the frame lock. That's kind of a longer explanation than I thought it would be. It's a very simple locking mechanism. It's just a bending piece of the frame that locks into place when the blade clears up, when it creates an opening right there, and your grip itself helps enforce it. That's the frame lock. That's it.